The first time my sister-in-law erased me, it happened in a room full of people who were supposed to know who I was. She smiled while doing it. I stood there, holding a tray of food I had cooked myself, listening as Lauren Whitmore, my husband's older sister, introduced me as someone who helps around the house. Not my name, not my role, not the fact that I was her brother's wife. Just a convenience. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt your place quietly reassigned while you were still standing in it, like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe. This story doesn't start loud. It starts polite, and that's the most dangerous kind. My name is Emily Whitmore. I was 31 years old when this happened, married for 6 years, and by every external measure, I had done exactly what was asked of me. I had stepped back. I met my husband, Daniel Whitmore, when we were both 24. He was ambitious, careful, deeply uncomfortable with chaos. I was steady, organized, and willing to carry weight quietly. When his career began to accelerate, we talked. Long nights, numbers on yellow legal pads. What made sense? I left my job. Not because he demanded it, not because anyone forced me, but because someone needed to keep the ground stable while he climbed. We agreed I would manage the house, the logistics, the unseen infrastructure of life. He could focus. I would make it possible. That was the deal. For years, it worked. I ran the household with precision. I handled finances, scheduling, repairs, family obligations. I tracked birthdays, remembered anniversaries, managed the social calendar his family expected without ever acknowledging. And his family noticed, just not the way I thought they would. Lauren Whitmore noticed first. Lauren was 3 years older than Daniel. Loud where he was restrained. Authoritative where he hesitated. She liked hierarchy. She liked visibility. She liked being the one consulted. From the beginning, she treated my role like a temporary condition. "So what do you do all day?" she asked once at brunch, eyes sharp, lips smiling. I answered calmly, "I manage our home full-time." She laughed. "Oh, must be nice." Her tone carried something else, not curiosity. Assessment. Her parents, Margaret Whitmore and Henry Whitmore, followed her lead. Margaret nodded when Lauren spoke. Henry deferred. Family conversations orbited around Lauren's opinions like gravity. Daniel noticed, but he didn't intervene. "They don't mean anything by it," he said once, not looking up from his laptop. That sentence would come back to me later. The event that changed everything was supposed to be simple. Lauren chaired a charity fundraiser for a local private school. Not ours. Not one we had any personal stake in. But appearances mattered. The Whitmores were known in the community. Attendance was expected. I cooked for 2 days. I coordinated with vendors. I prepped appetizers, labeled dietary restrictions, handled timing. Lauren approved the menu with a glance. "Just make sure it looks nice," she said. The fundraiser took place in a rented event hall in Westfield. White linens, soft lighting, donor plaques lining the walls. I stayed in the background. I always did. Halfway through the evening, someone asked Lauren how she managed everything. She smiled brightly. "Oh, I handle all the logistics myself. I'm very hands-on." Then she gestured vaguely in my direction. "I have help." That word landed hard. Help. Not partner. Not sister-in-law. Not the woman who had executed every detail. Just help. I looked at Daniel. He smiled politely at the donor and said nothing. Something in me shifted then. Quietly. Precisely. Later that night, as the event wrapped, Lauren made an announcement. Thanked sponsors. Thanked volunteers. She thanked her mother, her father, her husband. She did not say my name. Not once. Applause filled the room. I stood there, hands folded, face neutral, while something fundamental realigned inside me. This wasn't oversight. It was practice. On the drive home, Daniel said, "You did great tonight." I didn't respond. "What?" he asked. "Everything went smoothly." I looked out the window. "Yes," I said. "It did." He didn't hear the difference. The next week, Lauren called. She wanted me to help again with a larger project. Something involving donors, contracts, signatures. I agreed. That was my mistake, because this time, I paid attention. I noticed how my emails were forwarded without my name attached. How my work appeared in meetings as if it had materialized on its own. How Lauren spoke about decisions I had already made, using language that erased authorship. And then I noticed something else. Documents. Agreements. A proposal sent from Lauren's email address that contained my work, my structure, my planning, attached under her signature. And a line at the bottom that changed everything. Wrapped and approved by Daniel Whitmore. My husband had signed something I prepared without ever acknowledging I existed in the process. When I asked him about it, he hesitated. I thought it was easier this way, he said. Easier for whom was never clarified. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table long after he went to bed. The house was quiet, familiar. The place I had built and maintained with invisible effort. And for the first time, I asked myself a question I had been avoiding for years. If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone here notice the difference? The answer came faster than I expected, and it wasn't comforting. What I didn't know yet was that this fundraiser was only the surface, that beneath it was a much larger structure built on assumption, entitlement, and my silence. And once I stopped being silent, nothing stayed intact. Silence is only peaceful when it's chosen. Mine wasn't. The morning after the fundraiser, I woke up before Daniel. I always did. Habit, not duty. I made coffee, reviewed the calendar, noted the dry cleaning pickup and the plumber appointment Lauren had asked me to schedule for her house, not ours. I stared at that note longer than the others. Lauren didn't ask anymore. She delegated, and I complied because it was easier than explaining why I shouldn't. At 8:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. Lauren Whitmore, I answered without greeting. I need you to resend the donor breakdown, she said immediately. The one with the tiered incentives. I kept my voice even. I sent that yesterday. Yes, but send it again, she replied. And copy Daniel this time. He likes to stay in the loop. That sentence was surgical. Not Daniel asked. Not Daniel needs. Daniel likes. I sent the file. Again. Copied Daniel. Within minutes, Daniel replied to the thread. Looks good. Thanks, Lauren. Not my name. Not once. I closed my laptop and sat back in the chair. The kitchen was clean, the house quiet. Everything exactly as I had left it the night before, and suddenly it felt like a hotel room I'd overstayed in. Later that afternoon, Margaret Whitmore called. My mother-in-law rarely called directly. Lauren was the filter, the interpreter. Emily, Margaret said, voice soft, practiced. I wanted to thank you for helping Lauren so much. She's under a lot of pressure. Helping. I waited. You don't mind, do you? She continued. You've always been so flexible. Flexible meant available, replaceable, unseen. There was a pause. Oh, Margaret replied lightly. I didn't realize. I didn't explain. That night, Daniel came home late. He dropped his bag by the door, loosened his tie, and kissed my cheek absently. Lauren said the donors were impressed, he said. Good job. I looked at him. Why didn't you correct her? He frowned. Correct when she introduced me, I said. When she thanked everyone except me. When she forwarded my work under her name, he sighed, already tired of a conversation he hadn't fully entered. Emily, you're reading too much into this. That sentence landed heavier than the others. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I nodded. Okay, I said, and something in him relaxed, thinking the issue had passed. It hadn't. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern sharpened. Lauren included me in planning meetings, but introduced me to others as support. She asked me to draft proposals, then edited out my authorship. She scheduled calls during times she knew I'd be busy managing the house, then complained I wasn't responsive enough. At a family dinner, Henry Whitmore asked Daniel how work was going. Great, Daniel said. Busy, but Emily keeps everything running. Henry chuckled. Good woman, he said. Every man needs one of those. No one looked at me. I smiled anyway. Later, Lauren leaned across the table and said, You're lucky, Emily. Not everyone gets to just stay home. Just stay home. That night, I opened a folder on my laptop. I didn't label it revenge. I labeled it records. Emails, drafts, versions, metadata, timestamps. Every document I had created. Every thread where my work appeared under someone else's name. Every approval Daniel had given without question. I wasn't angry. I was precise. The turning point came with the board meeting. Lauren sat on the advisory board of a local foundation. She asked Daniel to attend as a representative. She asked me to prepare the presentation. I did. 36 slides. Clean, financially sound, clear projections, risk analysis. The night before the meeting, Daniel reviewed it. "This is solid," he said. "Lauren will be pleased." I closed my laptop. "She's presenting it," I said. He hesitated. "Well, she's on the board." "And I'm not," I replied. He looked at me then. Really looked. "What's going on with you lately?" I met his eyes. "I'm noticing where I don't exist." He rubbed his forehead. "You're making this bigger than it is." That was the last time I tried to explain. The meeting took place on a Thursday. Lauren stood at the front of the room, confident, composed, clicking through slides I had built. She spoke as if the analysis was hers, the conclusions instinctive. The board applauded. Someone asked a technical question. Lauren glanced at Daniel. He answered, "Wrong. Not disastrously, but enough to skew the numbers." I watched the room shift subtly. Interest cooled. Trust recalibrated. After the meeting, she cornered me in the hallway. "You should have briefed Daniel better," she said under her breath. I looked at her calmly. "I wrote the notes." She stared at me. "Don't do this," she said. "Not now." That phrase told me everything. Do this meant assert reality. Not now meant never. That evening, Daniel confronted me. "Lauren says you're being difficult," he said. "That you're not as cooperative as you used to be." I folded my hands. "Is that a problem for you?" He hesitated. "I just don't want tension with my family." I nodded slowly. "And what about tension with your wife?" He didn't answer. The next morning, I received an email from Lauren. Subject: Next steps. She outlined a new structure for upcoming projects. Tasks reassigned. Oversight centralized. My name appeared once, under support. At the bottom of the email, Daniel was copied. He replied within minutes. "Sounds good. Let's move forward." That was the moment. Not dramatic, not loud, just final. I forwarded the email to myself and added it to the folder. Records don't argue. They wait. What I didn't know yet was that Lauren wasn't just erasing me socially. She was positioning herself legally, and my silence had made her confident. The next chapter wouldn't be about disrespect. It would be about displacement. And once that happened, I would no longer be choosing whether to act. I would be responding to a removal already in motion. Displacement doesn't start with eviction. It starts with access. The first thing Lauren Whitmore took from me was not authority. It was information. I noticed it on a Tuesday morning when I opened our shared calendar and saw entries I hadn't added. Meetings, calls, a dinner marked family only. Family only was new. I checked my email. Threads I had been part of were gone. Not deleted, excluded. I didn't confront anyone. I watched. By Thursday, Margaret Whitmore had stopped copying me on holiday planning. Henry Whitmore stopped asking if I was coming to Sunday dinner. Invitations went through Daniel now. Always Daniel. And Daniel didn't notice. That was the quietest betrayal of all. That weekend, Lauren hosted a brunch at her house. I found out about it because Daniel asked me what dessert I planned to bring. "When did you hear about brunch?" I asked. "Lauren texted me yesterday," he said. "I assume she told you." She hadn't. I baked anyway. Habit is hard to break. When we arrived, Lauren greeted Daniel warmly. Hug, kiss on the cheek. She nodded at me like I was staff. "Oh good, you brought something," she said, reaching for the container. "Put it in the kitchen." I followed her in. Her kitchen was immaculate, magazine clean. Nothing like the controlled chaos of my own, where real living happened. She leaned against the counter and lowered her voice. "You should probably know," she said. "We've been talking about restructuring things." I waited. "With Daniel," she clarified. "And my parents." Restructuring was a word people used when they wanted to sound reasonable while taking something away. "What things?" I asked. She smiled thinly. "Roles, responsibilities, expectations." I nodded once. "And my role?" She shrugged lightly. "You don't really have one anymore." That was the first time she said it plainly. At the table, conversations flowed around me. Lauren talked about upcoming projects. Daniel nodded along. Margaret listened approvingly. I sat straight-backed, hands folded, saying little. At one point, Henry asked Daniel, "So what's the plan long-term?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "We're focusing on growth." Lauren's taking point. "It makes sense." Henry smiled. "Good. Keeps things in the family." I was sitting right there. After brunch, as people filtered out, Margaret pulled me aside. "You understand, Emily," she said softly. "This is all very grown up. You've always been so adaptable." Adaptable again. "I need to know something," I said calmly. "Is there a problem with me?" Margaret looked startled. "Oh no, not at all." Then she added, "You just don't have the same stake." I smiled politely. "And what stake would that be?" She hesitated. "Income, ownership, legacy." I thanked her for her honesty. That night, Daniel and I argued for the first time in years. Not shouting, controlled, surgical. "They don't respect me," I said. He exhaled. "They don't disrespect you. They just don't see you the way you want." I looked at him. "How do you see me?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than words could. "I see you as my wife," he said finally. "My partner, at home." At home. "And outside of it?" He frowned. "Why does that matter?" "Because you've been letting them rewrite me." I didn't say that out loud. I said something else. "I gave up my career for us." He bristled. "I never asked you to." "No," I agreed. "You just accepted it." Silence filled the room. That was when he said something he couldn't take back. "If you wanted more, you shouldn't have stepped back." I stared at him. "I stepped back so you could step forward." He didn't answer. The next morning, Lauren sent another email. This one included a legal attachment, a memorandum of understanding for a new foundation initiative. Lauren listed as director, Daniel as advisor. The household address listed under Daniel's name only. I wasn't mentioned anywhere. I checked the footer. Prepared by L. Whitmore. But the formatting was mine. The structure was mine. The language was mine. I searched my folder. There it was. An early draft. My draft. She had taken it, modified it, filed it, and Daniel had signed. That was the moment my stomach went cold. This wasn't just social erasure. It was legal. I printed the document, laid it next to my original, compared line by line. It was undeniable. I photographed everything, uploaded it, backed it up. Records don't panic. They prepare. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. Her name was Rebecca Klein. Mid-40s, sharp voice, no patience for drama. I told her everything. Slowly, factually. She asked pointed questions. "Are you compensated?" "No." "Are you named on shared assets?" "Minimal." "Do you have records of contribution?" "Yes." She paused. "They're setting you up to disappear," she said. I closed my eyes. "That's what it feels like." "Good," she replied. "Feelings aside, the evidence matters more." She explained marital contribution laws, intellectual property, unpaid labor, spousal rights. She didn't promise victory. She promised clarity. That evening, Daniel came home to find me reorganizing the office. I was removing my materials, my binders, my files. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Taking my work back," I said. "You can't just—" "I can," I replied. "I made it." He watched me silently. "This feels extreme," he said. I looked at him. "What part of being erased feels moderate to you?" He didn't answer. I carried the last box into the spare room and shut the door. For the first time in years, something in the house changed. Not the layout, the power. Lauren noticed within days. She called me directly. "First time in months." "You didn't send the updated draft," she said sharply. "I won't be," I replied. She laughed once. "Don't be petty," I answered evenly. "I'm being precise." "You're overestimating your position," she said. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "And you're underestimating your exposure." Silence. Then she hung up. That was the moment the chessboard shifted. She thought she was removing me. She didn't realize she had just revealed how much she'd taken. The next chapter wouldn't be about negotiation. It would be about consequences, and they would not be loud. They would be exact. Once you step out of a role, people panic when they realize how much of the structure depended on it. Lauren Whitmore panicked first. It showed up as irritation disguised as authority. Short emails, demands framed as reminders, phone calls that assumed compliance instead of asking for it. "Just resend the file," she said when she called 2 days later. No greeting, no context. "I don't have it," I replied. "Yes, you do," she snapped. "You always keep backups." I smiled to myself. "Not for projects I'm no longer involved in." She went quiet for half a second. long enough to register. "You're being difficult on purpose," she said. "No," I answered calmly. "I'm being accurate." She hung up. That afternoon, Daniel came home early. That alone told me something had shifted. "Lauren called him," he said, pacing the living room. "She's upset. She says you're withholding materials." I sat at the table, hands folded, posture straight. "I'm not withholding anything. I'm declining unpaid labor that's being claimed by someone else." He stopped pacing. "This isn't about money." "It never is," I said. "Until it is." He ran a hand through his hair. "You're embarrassing me." That sentence landed cleanly. No emotion attached, just information. I looked up at him. "You let them erase me. That didn't embarrass you." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "You're blowing this up, Emily." I tilted my head slightly. Am I? Or did it just stop being invisible? The next escalation came from Margaret Whitmore. She invited me to lunch. Just the two of us. A peace offering on the surface. We met at a quiet bistro she liked. White tablecloths, low voices, controlled environment. She ordered for both of us without asking. Always had. "Emily," she began gently, folding her napkin. "Lauren tells me you've been resistant lately." I took a sip of water. "Resistant to being erased?" "Yes," she sighed. "You know Lauren. She takes charge. That's just how she is." I nodded. "And this is how I am." Her eyes sharpened slightly. "You're creating unnecessary conflict." I met her gaze. Conflict existed long before I acknowledged it. She leaned back. "What do you want?" The question wasn't kind. It was strategic. I answered honestly. "Recognition. Boundaries. And to stop being used as invisible infrastructure." She smiled tightly. "You chose to stay home." "Yes. And choices have consequences," she said. I nodded. "They do. For everyone involved." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means my contribution didn't disappear just because it wasn't salaried." Her voice cooled. "You sound ungrateful." I finished my meal calmly. "And you sound threatened." She didn't deny it. That night, Daniel slept on the couch. Not because I asked him to, because he chose distance over discussion. I didn't chase him. I spent the evening reviewing documents with Rebecca Klein over video call. She was methodical. "You've got proof of intellectual contribution," she said. "Drafts, timelines, metadata. That matters. What about my role in the household?" She leaned closer to the screen. "That matters more than you think. Duration of marriage, sacrificed income, support enabling career advancement." She paused. "They're treating you like you opted out. Legally, you didn't." The next morning, Lauren made her boldest move yet. She sent an email to Daniel, copying their parents, and CC'd me as an afterthought. Subject: moving forward without disruption. She outlined a plan to streamline involvement and reduce friction. My role, according to the document, was no longer operational. Instead, she suggested I focus on domestic priorities. Daniel replied within 15 minutes. "Agreed. This feels like the best path." That was it. No conversation with me, no discussion, no acknowledgement. Just agreement. I stared at the screen. Not angry, clear. I forwarded the email to Rebecca. Her response came quickly. "They just documented exclusion. That helps you." I closed my laptop and went for a walk. When I came back, Daniel was waiting. "You're not responding to emails," he said. I looked at him. "I'm not responding to decisions made about me, without me." He crossed his arms. "You're acting like this is a business deal." I smiled faintly. It became one when my labor started carrying legal weight without my consent. He scoffed. "You're really going to blow up our marriage over this?" I stood slowly. "You're the one who signed away my existence in it." He stared at me. "That's not fair." I nodded. "Fairness hasn't been part of this for a while." That night, I slept in the spare room, not out of punishment, out of clarity. The next week moved fast. Lauren's project stalled. Donors asked questions she couldn't answer. Numbers didn't align. The confidence cracked. She tried calling me, twice. I didn't answer. Daniel noticed the strain. "You could help smooth this over," he said one evening. I met his eyes. "At what cost?" He didn't reply. That was the answer. 2 days later, Rebecca filed a formal notice. Not divorce. Disclosure. A request for full accounting of marital contributions, intellectual property usage, and asset attribution related to the foundation work. It was calm, professional, Surgical. Lauren called within an hour. "This is insane," she said, voice shaking with contained rage. "You're trying to take credit for things that aren't yours," I replied evenly. "I'm claiming authorship for work I created." Daniel grabbed the phone from her. "What are you doing?" I didn't raise my voice, protecting myself. He sounded incredulous. "From your own family," I corrected him. "From people who stopped treating me like family." Silence. Then Lauren's voice again, sharp. "You think paperwork makes you powerful?" I answered calmly. "No, it makes the truth visible." She laughed bitterly. "You won't win," I replied. "I'm not trying to." And for the first time, she didn't have a response. That was when I knew. This was no longer about being acknowledged. It was about being removed quietly. And I had just made that impossible. The next chapter would force everyone to choose between pretending nothing happened and confronting what they had built on my silence. And once forced, systems like theirs don't bend. They break. Once paperwork enters the room, people stop pretending this is about feelings. They start revealing motives. Lauren Whitmore showed up at my house 3 days after the disclosure notice was filed. Not my house, technically. The house Daniel and I shared. The one I ran and maintained and knew down to the sound each floorboard made at night. She didn't knock. She used the spare key. That alone told me how entitled she felt. I was at the dining table with my laptop open, reviewing notes from Rebecca Klein, when I heard the door open and close. Lauren's heels clicked sharply against the hardwood. "You've lost your mind," she said, before she even reached the room. I didn't stand. I didn't flinch. I closed my laptop slowly and looked up at her. "You're trespassing," I said. She laughed. "This is my brother's house." I tilted my head slightly. "It's my marital residence." She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." I folded my hands. "You should leave." She leaned against the chair across from me, eyes hard. "You really think you can just rewrite your place in this family because you filed some papers?" I answered evenly. "I didn't rewrite anything. I documented what already existed." She scoffed. "You stayed home. You made casseroles. You sent emails. That doesn't make you entitled to anything." Her words were meant to cut. They didn't. They clarified. I stood then, slowly, calmly. I created operational frameworks. I negotiated vendor terms. I structured donor proposals that you presented as your own. I ran logistics that kept your public image intact. For 6 years, I provided unpaid labor that directly supported both your personal and professional interests. She stared at me, stunned for a split second. Then anger flooded back in. "You think some lawyer is going to side with you over me?" I smiled faintly. "The law doesn't side with people. It recognizes facts." She stepped closer. "Daniel is furious." I nodded. "He should be. He signed documents without understanding their implications." Her mouth tightened. "He trusted you." I corrected her. "He trusted the version of me that stayed quiet." She slapped the table. "You're trying to punish us." I looked at her steadily. "Number. I'm removing myself from being exploited." She stared at me for a long moment, searching for something. Fear, doubt, hesitation. She didn't find it. "You'll regret this," she said. I replied calmly. "I already regret what I tolerated." She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. That night, Daniel didn't come home. I didn't text him. I didn't ask where he was. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The next day, Margaret Whitmore called. Her tone was no longer gentle. "This has gone too far, Emily." I sipped my coffee. "It went too far when my contributions were erased." "You're tearing this family apart," I answered simply. "I didn't start the fracture. I stopped absorbing it." She exhaled sharply. "You're embarrassing us." That word again. I replied evenly. "I'm not responsible for your discomfort." She hung up. Later that afternoon, Daniel returned. He looked tired. Not angry, just worn down. We sat across from each other in the living room, like strangers. "Why didn't you tell me you felt this way sooner?" he asked. I held his gaze. "I did. Repeatedly. You told me I was overreacting." He rubbed his face. "Lauren says you're trying to take control of something that isn't yours." I didn't raise my voice. "Lauren took control of things she didn't create." He frowned. "This feels like an attack." I nodded. Accountability often does. He leaned forward. What do you want? The same question Margaret had asked. This time, I answered differently. I want acknowledgement in writing. I want my name removed from anything I didn't consent to. I want compensation for the labor you and your sister benefited from. And I want boundaries enforced moving forward. He stared at me. That's a lot. I nodded. So was what you took. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something unexpected. I didn't think it mattered. That sentence ended something between us. I stood. That's the problem. He watched me walk away. The next escalation came from the foundation. The board requested clarification on authorship after inconsistencies surfaced. They wanted explanations, documentation, transparency. Lauren scrambled. Daniel avoided meetings. And I sat with Rebecca, calm and prepared. They underestimated you, Rebecca said during one call. I corrected her. They relied on my silence. The board's inquiry widened, not because I pushed it, because facts don't shrink when questioned. One donor requested a refund. Another paused contributions. Lauren's confidence fractured in public. She sent me a final message. You could stop this, I replied once. So could you have. And then I blocked her. The following week, Rebecca filed an amended request. Not aggressive. Comprehensive. Marital contribution accounting. Equitable compensation. Removal of misattributed work. Daniel received it at his office. He called me immediately. You're really doing this? I answered quietly. Yes. There was a pause. Then, softer. I don't recognize you anymore, I replied without emotion. You never really did. That night, I packed a bag. Not to leave, to prepare. Because when people lose control, they don't de-escalate. They expose themselves. And Lauren was about to make a mistake she couldn't walk back. The kind that turns leverage into liability. And once she did, this would no longer be about what I deserved. It would be about what she risked losing. Lauren Whitmore's mistake wasn't loud. It was rushed. People who are used to control don't prepare for resistance. They improvise. And improvisation leaves fingerprints. The first sign came from an email I wasn't supposed to see. It arrived in my inbox because Lauren forwarded it incorrectly. She meant to send it to Daniel only. Instead, she hit reply all. The subject line read, Attribution language. The body was short. We cannot acknowledge Emily's involvement. Doing so opens us up to claims we cannot afford right now. We need to maintain a unified narrative. Signed, Lauren Whitmore. I read it twice. Then I saved it. Then I forwarded it to Rebecca Klein. Her response came back in under 5 minutes. That's intent. Not opinion. Not misunderstanding. Intent. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. That afternoon, Daniel came home early again. He stood in the doorway, uncertain, like someone entering a space they no longer controlled. Lauren made a mistake, he said. I looked at him calmly. Several. He swallowed. She didn't mean to include you on that email. I nodded. I know. He sat down heavily. This is getting out of hand. I met his eyes. Number. It's getting documented. He rubbed his palms together. She's scared. That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. Good, I replied quietly. He looked up sharply. That's cold, I answered evenly. So was erasing me. The next escalation came from a different direction. A donor named Michael Reynolds, a quiet man in his late 50s who rarely spoke during meetings, requested a private call with Rebecca. Rebecca looped me in. Michael Reynolds had questions, specific ones, about authorship, about governance, about why a proposal he believed was written by a committee had in fact originated from a single unnamed contributor. I joined the call. Michael's voice was measured. I don't like confusion, he said. And I don't fund organizations that obscure labor, I answered factually. I prepared the initial frameworks and drafts. My name was removed before submission. I was not informed. There was a pause. Then Michael said, "Thank you for your honesty." After the call ended, Rebecca exhaled. They underestimated the donors, she said. They always do. Lauren responded to pressure the way she always had. She tried to control the narrative. She sent out a polished update to the board, framing the situation as a miscommunication. She emphasized unity, progress, forward motion. She did not mention my name. But this time, people noticed. 2 board members asked for clarification. One requested documentation. Lauren delayed. That was her second mistake. Delay suggests concealment. Daniel stopped sleeping at home entirely that week. He stayed with his parents. Easier, he said. I didn't argue. I used the quiet. I inventoried everything I had contributed over the years. Not emotionally, logistically. Spreadsheets, budgets, timelines, contacts, vendor negotiations, communications. I wasn't trying to prove worth. I was establishing scope. Rebecca assembled it into a packet that spoke for itself. Meanwhile, Lauren grew sharper. She called my phone from an unknown number. I answered. "You're enjoying this," she said, without greeting. I replied calmly. "I'm responding to actions." "You're destroying things," she snapped. I corrected her. "I'm letting the truth interrupt your version of events." She laughed bitterly. "You think this ends well for you?" I answered without hesitation. "It already has." She hung up. That evening, Daniel called. His voice was different, strained. "My parents are furious." I nodded to myself. "I'm sure. They think you're humiliating us," I replied evenly. "I didn't choose visibility. You forced it by erasing me." He sighed. "Can we just settle this quietly?" That word again. Quietly. I asked him one question. "What does quietly look like to you?" He hesitated. "You backing off." I let the silence stretch. "And what does backing off look like to me?" He didn't answer, because he knew quiet for him meant invisible for me. The following week, the Foundation's legal counsel reached out. They requested independent review of authorship claims. Rebecca handled it. Lauren objected. She sent an angry message to the board, accusing me of being vindictive. One board member replied, copying everyone. "We are reviewing documentation. Personal commentary is unnecessary." That was when Lauren lost the room. She came to my house again. This time, she knocked. I didn't open the door. "Emily," she said through the wood, "you're taking this too far." I answered from the other side. "You should leave. You don't understand what you're risking." I replied calmly. "I understand exactly what I'm no longer willing to lose." She waited. Then her voice softened, calculated. "What do you want to make this stop?" I closed my eyes briefly. "I want you to put my name where it belongs. I want compensation for my work. And I want you to acknowledge, in writing, that you misrepresented my contributions." She scoffed. "That would destroy my credibility." I answered simply. "It already exists. You're just choosing whether to own it." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something revealing. "Daniel won't forgive you." I replied evenly. "I'm not asking him to." She left shortly after. That night, Rebecca sent me an update. "The board is split. Donors are uneasy. Legal exposure is increasing." She paused before adding, "Lauren is cornered." I closed my laptop and looked around the house. The walls I'd painted, the systems I'd built, the marriage I'd supported. I felt no panic, just readiness. Because when people like Lauren feel cornered, they don't retreat, they escalate. And escalation, when you've been collecting records quietly, is just another word for evidence. The next chapter wouldn't be about what I asked for. It would be about what she tried to hide. And once exposed, there would be no version of this story where she walked away intact. Lauren Whitmore didn't escalate with confrontation. She escalated with erasure. 2 days after her visit to my door, I received a notice from the Foundation's internal system. My access credentials had been revoked. Not that I'd used them in weeks, but the timing mattered. It was symbolic, a statement. You are no longer relevant. Except she made one mistake. Revoking access doesn't erase history. It flags it. Rebecca Klein called me within the hour. "They locked you out," she said. "That tells me something." "What?" "They're reorganizing records." I sat at the kitchen counter, calm. "To hide?" "To curate," she replied. Same thing, legally. That afternoon, Michael Reynolds requested another call. This time, he wasn't alone. 2 other donors joined. Quiet voices, careful questions. "We'd like to understand the timeline," Michael said. "When were these materials created? By whom? And when did authorship change?" I answered with dates, attachments, version histories. No emotion, just sequence. Silence followed. Then one of the other donors spoke. "That's not an oversight." "No," I said. "It isn't." After the call, Rebecca exhaled slowly. "They're preparing to protect themselves," she said. "Not the organization. Themselves." Lauren's next move came through Margaret. My mother-in-law showed up unannounced. She stood on the porch, hands folded, face composed, like this was a social call. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Emily," she said softly, "this has gone far enough." I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "We can talk here." She looked displeased, but adjusted. "Lauren is under tremendous stress." I nodded. "So am I," she frowned. "You're tearing apart something Daniel cares deeply about," I answered calmly. Daniel signed documents without reading them. He allowed my work to be claimed by someone else. That wasn't my choice. Margaret sighed. "You always have to make things so complicated." I met her eyes. "Number one, I stopped simplifying myself for your comfort." She crossed her arms. "Lauren says you're doing this out of resentment," I replied evenly. Lauren would say that. There it was. The assumption that Lauren's narrative held more weight than my evidence. Margaret leaned in slightly. "What will it take for you to let this go?" I didn't hesitate. "For the truth to be acknowledged." She shook her head. "That won't happen." I nodded. "Then this won't stop." Her lips tightened. "You're forcing us to choose," I corrected her. "You already did." She stared at me, then turned and walked away. That night, Daniel finally came home. He didn't say hello. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom, arms crossed. "Lauren's been advised to step back," he said. I looked up from folding laundry. "Advised by whom?" "The board. Legal counsel." I nodded. "Good." He bristled. "You sound pleased." I folded a shirt carefully. "I sound relieved." He exhaled sharply. "Do you know what this is doing to my family?" I looked at him. "Do you know what it did to me to watch you choose them over me repeatedly?" He didn't answer. Instead, he said something quieter. "Lauren says if you just stayed in your lane, none of this would have happened." I turned to him fully then. "In what lane would that be?" He hesitated. "Home. Support. Background." I smiled faintly. "Invisible." He didn't deny it. That was when I knew. This wasn't about misunderstanding. It was about expectation. The expectation that I would absorb discomfort indefinitely. The next morning, Rebecca called with urgency. "They're preparing a statement," she said. "They're framing this as a dispute over credit, not contribution." "That's misleading." "Yes," she replied. "And actionable." By noon, Lauren sent out a board-wide email. She acknowledged collaborative input, but emphasized that final decisions, leadership, and execution were hers. She framed my involvement as informal assistance, offered voluntarily. I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Rebecca with one line. "This contradicts earlier communications." Her reply was immediate. "Good. Contradictions are leverage." That afternoon, something unexpected happened. Henry Whitmore called me directly. First time in years. His voice was strained. "Emily," he said, "this has gotten out of hand." I replied calmly. "It got out of hand when no one intervened." He cleared his throat. "Lauren is under investigation." I nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "She says you're trying to destroy her." I answered evenly. "I'm responding to what she did." There was a long pause. Then Henry said something that surprised me. "I didn't realize how much you did." I closed my eyes briefly. No one ever does when it's done quietly. He sighed. "What do you—" I answered truthfully. "For this to be handled properly, legally, transparently." He nodded. "I'll speak." I didn't thank him. Acknowledgement without accountability doesn't change outcomes. That evening, Lauren made her final mistake. She tried to settle privately. She sent me an email. Subject: "Let's resolve this." She offered compensation. Modest. Conditional. In exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and a public statement affirming her leadership. I forwarded it to Rebecca. Her response was blunt. "She's offering hush money." I smiled for the first time in days. That was it. That was the line. Rebecca replied to Lauren on my behalf. "We decline. Further communication should go through counsel." Within an hour, the board convened an emergency meeting. Within 2, Lauren was placed on temporary leave pending review. Daniel called me, voice shaking. "Did you know this would happen?" I answered calmly. I knew what the truth would do once it was seen. He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "You didn't warn me." I met his eyes. "You didn't listen." Silence filled the room. Heavy. Permanent. The next chapter wouldn't be about Lauren scrambling. It would be about Daniel realizing that by standing still, he had chosen a side. And once realized, There would be consequences he couldn't redirect. Because silence isn't neutral, it's alignment. And his alignment was about to cost him more than he understood. The moment alignment becomes visible, denial collapses. Daniel didn't speak to me for 2 days after Lauren was placed on leave. He stayed in the house, moved around quietly, took calls behind closed doors. I could hear his voice change depending on who was on the other end. Defensive with Lauren, measured with his parents, hollow with me. I didn't push. Pressure makes people cling to the story that protects them. Space forces them to confront what they chose. On the third morning, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. No phone, no laptop, just him. They're asking questions, he said. Who? I asked, already knowing. The board, legal, donors. I nodded. They want to know why I signed off on things I didn't write. I kept my tone neutral. And what did you tell them? He hesitated. That I trusted Lauren. I waited. And me? I asked. He looked down. I didn't think it mattered. That sentence landed with weight. Not shock. Confirmation. I stood and poured myself coffee. Daniel, I said calmly, you didn't just trust Lauren. You deferred to her at my expense. He rubbed his hands together. I was trying to keep peace. I turned back to him. No, you were avoiding discomfort. He flinched slightly. That's not fair. I met his eyes. Fair would have been asking where the work came from. Fair would have been correcting her when she erased me. Fair would have been refusing to sign what you didn't understand. Silence stretched. Then he asked the question I had been expecting. Are you going to leave me? I considered him carefully before answering. I already left the role you assigned me. What happens next depends on what you do. His breath caught. What do you want from me? This time, the question wasn't strategic. It was frightened. I want you to stop hiding behind your family, I said. I want you to acknowledge, out loud and in writing, what I contributed and how you benefited from it. And I want you to choose whether you're my husband or their shield. He swallowed. That's an ultimatum. I shook my head. It's a boundary. That afternoon, Rebecca called with an update. The board is widening the review, she said. They found inconsistencies in earlier filings. Lauren didn't just misattribute. She altered timelines. I closed my eyes briefly. Forgery? Not criminal yet, Rebecca replied, but negligent at best, deceptive at worst. Daniel overheard the call. He sat very still. When I hung up, he spoke quietly. She's blaming you. I nodded. Of course she is. She says you manipulated things. I looked at him. And do you believe that? He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, no. That was the first crack. The next day, Daniel's parents requested a meeting. All 4 of us. Neutral location. A conference room at Henry's office. I agreed. Rebecca attended with me. Lauren was not invited. That fact alone spoke volumes. Margaret sat rigidly. Henry avoided my eyes. Daniel looked like he hadn't slept. The family attorney cleared his throat and outlined the situation. Exposure, liability, reputational risk. Then he turned to me. Mrs. Whitmore, he said, what outcome are you seeking? I answered evenly. Accurate attribution, compensation for my work, and acknowledgement that I was excluded improperly. Margaret interrupted. This is tearing us apart. I looked at her calmly. No, it's revealing what was already torn. Henry spoke then. We didn't realize how much you were involved. I nodded. That's because no one asked. Daniel shifted in his seat. I should have asked, he said. Margaret turned sharply toward him. Daniel, he raised a hand. Number 1. I should have. The room went still. That was the first time he had contradicted her. The attorney cleared his throat again. Given the documentation, it would be advisable to resolve this without litigation. Rebecca leaned forward. My client is open to resolution, but not erasure. Margaret exhaled sharply. What does that mean? Rebecca didn't soften. It means written acknowledgement, fair compensation, and a public correction of prior misrepresentation. Henry nodded slowly. That seems reasonable. Margaret stared at him. You can't be serious. He met her gaze. I am. Lauren called Daniel during the meeting. He declined the call. That was the second crack. By the end of the meeting, terms were outlined. Not finalized, but acknowledged. When we walked out, Daniel lagged behind. I didn't know how bad it had gotten, he said quietly. I didn't slow down. You knew enough to benefit. He winced. That night, Lauren sent Daniel a barrage of messages, accusations, threats, emotional appeals. He showed them to me without commentary. One message stood out. She was never meant to be more than support. You let her forget that. Daniel stared at the screen for a long time. Then he turned the phone off. The following week, the board released a statement. Careful language, correction without spectacle. They acknowledged misattribution, clarified contributions, announced interim leadership. Lauren's name was absent. Donors responded cautiously. Some returned, some didn't. The foundation survived. Lauren's authority didn't. That evening, Daniel asked me to sit with him. I'm going to need to testify, he said. Under oath. I nodded. And I'm going to tell the truth. I studied his face. For the first time? Or consistently? He swallowed. Consistently. I let that settle. Then understand this, I said. Truth doesn't restore what silence destroyed. It only stops further damage. He nodded. I know. The next chapter wouldn't be about Lauren losing control. It would be about Daniel facing what alignment had cost him. Because when you build your life on someone else's quiet labor, you don't just lose a foundation when it leaves. You lose the illusion that you earned the ground you're standing on. Accountability doesn't arrive with anger. It arrives with paperwork and witnesses. Daniel's deposition was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. He wore a suit he rarely used anymore, sat straighter than usual, spoke slower. He had always been careful with words. Now, each one carried consequence. I wasn't in the room. I didn't need to be. Rebecca Klein called me afterward. He told the truth, she said. All of it. I closed my eyes briefly. Was it enough? Yes, she replied. And it cost him. That cost became visible quickly. The foundation's legal team revised earlier filings. Daniel's advisory role was narrowed. His name was removed from 2 committees. Not as punishment, as correction. He came home that night, quiet, drained. They asked why I never questioned the authorship, he said, sitting across from me at the table. And? I asked. I said I assumed it came from Lauren because I benefited from not asking. That was as close to honesty as he'd ever come. The next development came from an unexpected place. Lauren Whitmore's husband, Andrew Whitmore, requested a meeting with the board independently. No coordination, no warning. Rebecca called me immediately. This changes things, she said. How? He's distancing himself. Publicly. Andrew's testimony confirmed what documents already suggested. Lauren had centralized control, filtered information, and actively excluded contributors who didn't serve her narrative, including me. The board moved swiftly after that. Lauren was formally removed from leadership. Her advisory position terminated. Her name quietly scrubbed from the foundation's public materials. No press release, no spectacle, just absence. Daniel's parents didn't speak for days. When Margaret finally called, her voice sounded older. This didn't have to happen, she said. I replied calmly. It happened because it was already happening. I just stopped absorbing it, she sighed. You've changed, I answered without hesitation. I stopped disappearing. She did. That night, Daniel sat beside me on the couch. No touching, no defensiveness. I didn't realize how much of my success leaned on you, he said. I kept my eyes forward. Realizing it now doesn't change the years before. I know, he replied, but I'm trying to understand what comes next. I turned to him. What comes next depends on whether you can live without someone else buffering consequences for you. He nodded slowly. I don't know if I can fix this. I answered honestly. Fixing it isn't the goal. Responsibility is. The compensation agreement was finalized the following week. It wasn't extravagant. It wasn't symbolic. It was payment for documented labor, recognition of contribution, written acknowledgement filed with the foundation and shared with the board. Lauren signed through counsel. She didn't include a note. I didn't expect one. The day the funds transferred, I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I opened a new account in my name only and moved the money there. Ownership, it's clean. Daniel watched silently. Later that evening, he asked the question he'd been circling for weeks. Are we going to survive this? I looked at him fully. That depends on whether you understand this wasn't about Lauren. He weighed. It was about you choosing comfort over truth, I said. Over and over. He nodded. I see that now. Seeing it isn't enough, I replied. I need to know you won't outsource integrity again. He didn't answer right away. Then he said something that surprised me. I've asked my parents to step back. I studied him. From what? From us. From decisions. From influence. That was new. They're furious, he added. I nodded. Of course they are. But I meant it, he said. No more filtering. No more letting Lauren speak for me. Or them. I considered his words carefully. Then I said, time will tell. Lauren didn't reach out again. Her name faded from conversations, from invitations, from assumed authority. She moved on to other circles, other structures, places where history didn't follow her. Daniel's family adjusted awkwardly. Holidays became smaller, quieter, less performative. And for the first time, no one asked me to help. That absence felt like relief. One evening, as I organized old files, I found an early calendar from our first year of marriage. Notes in my handwriting, plans, logistics. I closed it gently. That version of me did what she thought love required. This version knows better. The next chapter wouldn't be about fallout. It would be about rebuilding on terms that didn't require disappearance. Because once you stop being invisible, there's no way to go back. And the life you build after that isn't louder. It's sturdier, and it finally belongs to you. Rebuilding doesn't announce itself. It happens quietly. In choices no one applauds. The first thing I rebuilt was my time. I stopped coordinating schedules that weren't mine. I stopped tracking birthdays for people who never remembered mine. I stopped preparing for holidays weeks in advance, only to be treated like an accessory once the table was set. When Thanksgiving came, Daniel asked what I wanted to do. I looked at him for a long moment. I don't know yet, I said. And that's the answer. He nodded. No argument, no persuasion. That mattered. The second thing I rebuilt was my identity. Not the one Lauren had flattened into support, or the one Daniel had tucked neatly into home, but the one that existed before I stepped back. I enrolled in a certification program I'd postponed for years, quietly, without announcing it to anyone in the family. When Margaret found out through Daniel, she called. I didn't know you were planning to work again, she said, tone carefully neutral. I never stopped working, I replied. I just stopped being paid. She didn't respond. Daniel noticed the changes in small ways. I kept my own calendar. I took days away without explaining. I no longer checked in before making decisions that affected only me. You seem independent, he said one evening, like he wasn't sure whether it was an observation or a complaint. I always was, I replied. I just used to spend it on other people. The foundation fallout continued without me. Lauren's removal triggered internal reviews of other processes. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to make donors cautious, boards careful, and reputations less inflated. Daniel's role stabilized, but it never returned to what it was. He didn't complain. That was another change. One night, he asked if we could talk. Not about the past, about the future. I don't want to build a life that only works when you disappear, he said. I believed he meant it. Belief, however, is not commitment. Commitment is repetition, consistency, time. So I told him what I needed. Separate finances. Clear boundaries with his family. No more decisions made about me without me. And space for me to become someone new, without being asked who I was doing it for. He listened. He didn't negotiate. That was progress. Christmas came quietly that year. No large gatherings, no performance. Just the two of us. Daniel asked if I wanted to invite his parents. I shook my head. Not this year. He accepted it. That acceptance felt heavier than any apology. On Christmas morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and sat by the window watching the light shift across the street. For the first time in years, I didn't feel braced. No anticipation of disrespect. No mental rehearsal of polite deflection. Just calm. Later that day, Daniel handed me a small box. Inside was a simple notebook, leather-bound, unmarked. For whatever you're building next, he said. I thanked him. I didn't tell him I'd already started. Lauren sent one final message that month. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an accusation. It was a notification. She had accepted a new role elsewhere. I read it once. Then I deleted it. I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. That night, Daniel asked me something unexpected. Do you think you'd have left if this hadn't happened? I considered it carefully. No, I said. I would have stayed smaller. He nodded slowly. I don't want that version of us anymore. I met his eyes. Neither do I. The truth was, even if our marriage didn't survive, I would. That knowledge changed everything. The power imbalance was gone. Not because I took something from them, because I stopped giving everything away. The next chapter wouldn't be about reconciliation. It would be about what happens when a woman who has been minimized for years finally occupies her full space, and how uncomfortable that makes people who benefited from her silence. Occupying space changes the temperature of a room. People who were comfortable when you were quiet start adjusting when you're not. I noticed it first with Daniel's family, not in arguments, in absence. Margaret stopped calling. Henry sent a short text on my birthday. No follow-up. Invitations came later, smaller, stripped of expectation. No one asked me to organize, host, or smooth anything over. They were learning to function without my unpaid labor. Awkwardly, Daniel watched it happen without interference. That mattered more than anything he said. I watched him too, not for promises, for patterns. He started doing his own scheduling, remembered his own obligations, missed a few things, and owned it instead of deflecting. When his parents complained, he didn't reroute them to me. That was new. One evening, after dinner, he said, "They asked why you're distant." I looked up from my book. "And what did you say?" "That you're not distant," he replied. "You're just no longer available on demand." I nodded. "That's accurate." He hesitated, then added, "They didn't like that answer." I smiled faintly. Growth is rarely comfortable for spectators. The certification program intensified. Deadlines, exams, long nights. My brain felt alive in a way it hadn't in years. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was reclaiming something. Daniel offered help once. "Do you want me to quiz you?" he asked. I considered it. "No," I said. "This one is mine." He accepted it, without offense. That, too, was progress. The final loose end was the foundation. A formal correction was issued. My name appeared in the archive documentation. Not front-facing, not performative. Accurate. That was enough. Lauren's replacement reached out briefly. Professional, polite, no history. She thanked me for my prior work. I thanked her for acknowledging it. We didn't speak again. One afternoon, Margaret requested a meeting. Just her and me. I agreed. We met at a cafe halfway between our houses. Neutral ground. She looked older than I remembered. Not fragile, just less certain. "I didn't raise my children this way," she said after we ordered. I didn't respond. "You've changed the family dynamic," she continued. "Things feel unstable." I met her eyes calmly. They were stable because I absorbed what no one else wanted to carry. She frowned. "That's not how we saw it." I nodded. "I know." She stirred her coffee. "I don't understand why you couldn't just let Lauren lead," I answered simply. "Because leadership that depends on erasing others isn't leadership. It's control." She looked at me for a long time. "You sound very sure of yourself." I nodded. "I am." She sighed. "I don't know how to relate to you anymore." I didn't soften. "You don't have to. Just respect the boundaries." She left early. She didn't argue. That was her concession. At home, Daniel asked how it went. "She's adjusting," I said. "To what?" "To not being centered in my decisions." He nodded. "I'm adjusting too." That night, I wrote in the notebook he'd given me. Not plans, principles. I will not disappear to make others comfortable. I will not trade silence for belonging. I will not confuse usefulness with love. The words felt solid, earned. A week later, Daniel asked if I wanted to renew our vows. The question surprised me. "Not yet," I said. He waited. "I need to see who we are when there's no crisis holding us together." He nodded. "I understand." And for the first time, I believed him. Because he didn't push. He didn't frame it as loss. He let the space exist. That's when I knew something fundamental had shifted. Not because he apologized. Because he stopped expecting me to stay the same. The final chapter wouldn't be about closure with them. It would be about choosing myself without needing permission. Because the most lasting revenge isn't punishment. It's independence. And once you have it, the story doesn't circle back. It moves forward. The quiet after upheaval is where truth settles. By the time spring arrived, the house felt different. Not emptier, clearer. Fewer assumptions hanging in the air. fewer roles silently assigned and followed without question. Daniel and I existed side by side, not entangled by obligation. We cooked separately sometimes, took separate mornings, spoke honestly without urgency. It wasn't romantic. It was real. I finished my certification in early April. I didn't announce it. I didn't post it anywhere. I printed the certificate, held it for a moment, then placed it in the notebook Daniel had given me. Proof I didn't need applause to move forward. A month later, I accepted a consulting role. Not through Lauren, not through family connections, through a former colleague who remembered me from before I stepped back. The offer wasn't flashy. The pay was fair. The authority was clear. Most importantly, my name was on the contract. Daniel read it carefully before congratulating me. "I'm proud of you," he said. I believed him. But pride wasn't what I needed anymore. Autonomy was. His family faded further into the background. No confrontations, no reconciliations, just distance that slowly normalized itself. Margaret sent a polite text once. No subtext, no demand, just a sentence wishing me well. I replied with the same. That was enough. Lauren never reached out again. I heard she'd taken a role in another organization. New circle, new hierarchy. Somewhere my history with her didn't exist. Good. Some stories don't need endings. They just need distance. One evening, Daniel asked me if I was happy. I didn't answer right away. Happiness is a loaded word. It implies arrival, completion. "I'm grounded," I said finally. "I'm not negotiating my worth anymore." He nodded. "I know now that loving you means letting you take up space," he said. I looked at him. Loving me means not needing me to shrink. He accepted that without defense. Whether our marriage would last wasn't something I needed to decide immediately. That was the biggest change of all. I no longer rushed toward certainty to avoid discomfort. I trusted myself to choose later. On my birthday, I woke up early and sat alone in the living room, sunlight spilling across the floor. I thought about the woman I had been when this began, the one who thought stepping back was the same as being supportive, the one who confused silence with grace, the one who believed being needed was the same as being valued. I don't resent her. She did what she knew how to do. But I don't live as her anymore. Here's what I know now. If you are only respected when you are useful, the respect isn't real. If love requires you to disappear, it isn't love. If family harmony depends on your silence, the harmony is already broken. Revenge didn't come as destruction. It came as clarity. I didn't take anything from them. I stopped giving myself away. And when I did, the power they thought they had over me simply dissolved. If this story resonated with you, like it. If you've ever been diminished inside a family or marriage that benefited from your quiet labor, leave a comment. Subscribe if you want more real-life family drama stories about betrayal, revenge without noise, and the kind of karma that arrives through self-respect. Because the strongest ending isn't when they fall, it's when you stand fully in your life and realize you no longer need them to see you at all.